So we had this rabbit, this 14-pound rabbit, by the way. There was no, small rabbit on the table with a white rabbit. So we just thought, what's with the white hair? This guy interviewing me. And then having that, you can see the ears. We didn't move around.
Well, Senator Dodd, welcome to YouTube.
Good to be with you.
Yeah, and thanks for coming in today to answer some questions. By your own admission, you aren't one of the celebrity candidates, as you call them, of this race. So perhaps the most interesting first question comes from the user ElectroPhil, who asks, who are you?
Good question. Important first question. Well, I'm a senator of 26 years, been elected 5 times by the people of Connecticut, served in the House before then. I served in the Peace Corps back in the 1960s. The only Democratic candidate that served in the military. I was in the National Guard, Army Reserves. No great war hero, but went through basic training and spent time doing that. I come from a family of public servants, people involved in public life of our country. My father was the executive trial counsel at the Nuremberg trials, hence my strong interest growing up in a family with a rule of law. It was something I had a constant diet of as a child. My sisters and brothers are teachers, university level, grammar school, elementary, early development stuff, all part of your DNA, in a sense, of who you are beyond sort of what's in your resume on certain things. And I'm someone with what's the rationale for this campaign? I mean, I've never sought the presidency before.
Right, 26 years of many legislative accomplishments. Why running for president?
Well, part of it is because I think a lot of us feel there's an awful lot at stake here, that what's going on at home and abroad is deeply troubling. It seems to be a broken time in many ways for all the obvious reasons. And can anybody make a difference in all of this? And most people didn't get up this morning wondering if they were Democrats or Republicans, liberals or conservatives. They wondered if anyone was listening, anyone paying any attention, and did anyone have any idea on how to find some common answers here to problems from healthcare to energy, environmental issues, to provide us some sort of optimism and confidence we can begin to deal with these issues. And throughout this 26 years, that's all I've done. I mean, I'm known by my other senators, if you will, as someone you go to when you try to get Democrats and Republicans together. And every bill I've mentioned to you, my major partner was a conservative Republican. In some cases, the only time I ever agreed with them on anything. But I went out and found people who cared about these issues, even though we disagreed on other things, to try and move the ball forward and create change.
So you think you're someone who can sort of reach across the aisle?
It's what I do. I mean, I think at this point here, this may be the only job in America where prior references aren't required. In fact, we sort of celebrate the idea that give me someone who's never done this. I mean, we wouldn't have a tooth extracted without some assurance you may have tried this before. And so the idea that we're flirting after 6 years of on-the-job training with an administration that frankly proved its utter incompetency because of what they failed to understand and know how to do, I think has cost us dearly here. And I think, frankly, there's an appetite, maybe for the first time in years, for some experience in producing results that create change.
The experience argument is certainly a compelling one, and yourself and Joe Biden make it often. Yet the field in the primary race right now is very crowded, and your poll numbers in Iowa are quite low, and across the nation they are. What keeps the Dodd campaign going right now?
Well, because polls don't mean a lot in Iowa. I mean, I think people spend a lot of time looking at poll numbers. John Kerry, just to give you an idea, 4 years ago, was at 4% in the polls on December 23rd, 2003. He was more than 20 points behind Howard Dean with about 3 weeks to go, 25 points behind him in New Hampshire. People don't make up their minds in these states until very late. It's a caucus process in Iowa, not a primary process.
So you're hoping for a late surge that will...
Surge, and also that these numbers don't reflect where people are in the state. We have about 80 people on the ground. We have 13 offices open in Iowa. People are showing up for these events and coming out. We have almost between 60 and 65% of the likely caucus goers are still undecided, and 25% who made up their mind have said, I could change my mind before I go in and vote on January 3rd. So I still believe there's traction here. There's a possibility. None of us know the answer to this, obviously. But most Iowans get a little offended by the idea that somehow I'm going to vote for you because you brought Oprah to town. I mean, that's just a little offensive here. Or the idea that because my husband was the president, that's a justification here. I just don't buy that, and I think electability is important. And in both cases, I think there's a serious issue of electability.
Against the Republican candidate?
Absolutely. This is not a slam dunk. Any Democrat we nominate is not going to be elected in November of 08. I ran the party for Bill Clinton in 95 and 96. So not only have I been through 8 elections in my own state and how to win them, but I also know how to win a national election. And I can tell you right out, it's a very difficult process. And if we're only talking to each other, or assume that if we only get the Democrats to show up, we'll win, you better attract independents and Republicans who are seeking change, or you'll be back in the minority again in both houses of Congress, and you'll be looking at 4 to 8 years of another Republican administration.
One thing that's different in this election, and certainly different from the 90s when you headed up the DNC, is the existence of YouTube and new media.
Right.
We've asked some users to submit video questions as well. This one isn't from Iowa, but it's from Long Island, New York.
Senator Dodd, my name's Kim Friedrich. You may remember me from the YouTube debates as the future breast cancer survivor from Long Island. I have a healthcare related question. I was reading over your plan and I was wondering, is affordability going to be determined by a flat rate nationwide or will it be adjusted by region? For example, $50,000 may get you very far in a place like Kentucky, but on Long Island where a fixer-upper home costs somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000, and I'm not talking about a mansion here, and land taxes can cost you $7,000 or more for a quarter acre of land. $50,000 doesn't get you very far and doesn't allow you to afford health insurance. So please let me know, will it be adjusted by region or will it be a flat rate nationwide? Thank you.
Yeah, I look at sort of the nationwide approach on it. I'm uneasy about these regional approaches, actually for the very same reason she's concerned about it. In a way, by spreading out risk here across the country, you have a far greater chance of reducing the price and cost of these products. Here, the danger is, in the past, of course, the insurance industry and others want to deal with healthy, wealthier people who are not physically ill. Here, that's the ideal constituency. What you don't want to include is people who are older, less well off, and more inclined to have health issues.
But if people in New York are paying more than people in Iowa, isn't that a problem?
Yeah, but if you spread that risk out here, you're going to get a greater chance of bringing down the cost to everybody here, it seems to me.
Let's talk about Congress. Let's talk about the Constitution a little bit. You submitted a video for the Republican YouTube debate in which you asked Republican candidates what they would do to restore the Constitution.
Yeah.
So I want to find out what you would do to restore the Constitution. So to end off this conversation, I'm going to read you some questions that were submitted, some that we've come up with, in a little round called Constitutional or Not. And so this is sort of a spitfire round. Keep the answers sort of nice and short, but I'm going to list some policies, and you say, is that constitutional or not? Maybe give a sentence or two of explanation as to why you think that. The first question comes from Lawrence, and he says, he's talking about the current use of the national security letters, which of course is a provision of the Patriot Act that expands the FBI's authority to demand personal records from people. Constitutional or not, the current use of NSLs? Well,
not without court orders and warrants here. You've got to have some justification for it, not just asking for it. Is not a justification for getting it here.
So with proper judicial approval?
Proper judicial. That's why I'm vehemently opposed to the retroactive immunity being extended to the telecommunications industry for having turned over millions of records without prior court orders or warrants.
Constitutional or not, national identity cards?
Well, they might be. I'm resistant to them. I've opposed them. They make me very uneasy about too much information being held by people who want to use that information for purposes other than that what may benefit me. So I'm resistant to the idea.
Constitutional or not, marriage between a man and a man or a woman and a woman?
Well, it can be constitutional. Up to the states to decide what they want to do. It's really a state matter, in my view. The one thing we ought to change under the Defense of Marriage Act is that the president ought to be able to recognize, at least federally, if a state decides that a marriage between people of the same gender, then they ought to be recognized by the president. Other states may not want to do that, but that's how we ought to change the Defense of Marriage Act.
Constitutional, but a state issue.
That's right.
Okay. Constitutional or not, the Military Commissions Act of 2006, which, for our viewers, we should just say quickly, lets the military courts try unlawful enemy combatants.
Yeah, this is a disastrous, maybe the worst piece of legislation adopted by the Congress in the last 30 years. Abandoned habeas corpus, allowed torture to be used to collect information, and walked away from the Geneva Convention. And I've written the legislation that reforms all of that. I don't have a lot of co-sponsors on it yet, but we're trying to overturn that. But I believe those acts were unconstitutional.
The last one, which has come up a little bit more recently, and has to do with FISA and phone surveillance, particularly in this situation. Constitutional or not, phone surveillance of calls made by Americans to foreigners when those Americans are not on U.S. soil.
Well, it could, again, be constitutional, provided there are court orders and warrants. So you've got to have a justification for doing it other than just taking that information in. So it's a narrower call, obviously, here, and one that may be beyond the scope here in terms of jurisdiction. But I don't know the answer clearly to that one, but I certainly want to contest it.
Well, Senator, thanks for coming in
today.
Thank you. Before we let you go, though, I'd like to just have you look into our camera over there and tell folks out there on the internet why they should vote for Chris Dodd.
Well, I think it's, again, electable, but beyond electability, having 26 years in the Senate of actually bringing people together to create change. One that believes that this nation's best days are ahead of us, that we have the capabilities, the assets here to make a difference. I'm the father of a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and someday they're going to ask me and you, what did you and I do at a broken time to get this right? And I think we have the capacity to do so, but if we continue with the policies we're following today, I worry about the future of my country at home and our reputation and the condition of mankind around the world. So this is a critical moment for our country and for our leadership in the world, choosing people who can win and who can lead with the proven ability to produce results and bring people together, I think has arrived.
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate
Thank
you
you very
coming in
much.
and answering
Yeah.
questions.
Thank you very much.